your life is going to change, but more important, your son's life is going to change forever. America will never be the same after September 11, 2001.
He's on almost everyone's list of the most likely suspects for today's attacks.
The alleged mastermind, America's most wanted terrorist, Osama bin Laden.
He has described the United States as the devil. This is the beast.
Meanwhile, Osama bin Laden is a name that we have been hearing all day long.
They now believe that bin Laden was responsible.
I'm told that Osama bin Laden likely deployed more than 50 terrorists.
They are now, and I'm quoting here, 90% certain
somebody provided the logistical support for this operation, and clearly the only person.
Bin Laden comes to mind right away, Mr. Brenner.
Indeed, he certainly does. Bin Laden.
This is his M.O.
We have to look to the Middle East. We have to look to Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Bin Laden.
The American walks every day, normal, going to work. He's walking downtown in Manhattan, and all of a sudden,
de helft van de Nederlandse moslims heeft begrip voor de aanslagen van 11 september.
Armed with knives, armed with chemical, biological, nuclear weapons. Fanatics, terrorists, September 11th. September 11th, killers, September 11th, terrorists. Terrorists of Al-Qaeda, terrorists, nuclear weapons, terrorists. 9/11, terror, terrorists, evil. September 11th, September 11th.
The terrorists, war and danger. September 11th, terrorism, global terrorism, terrorism, terrorists. Terrorists, 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 the terror. Terrorists, terrorists, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism, terrorists. Terrorism. September 11th, world terrorism, terrorism. September 11th, global terrorism. September the 11th, terror. Weapons of mass destruction. September the 11th, terrorists. The evil terrorists, no.
Terrorism. The words are hypnotically repeated. Terrorism, terrorist, terrorist threat, and of course, believed to be linked to Al-Qaeda.
As if a demolition team set off when you see the old demolitions of these old buildings.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown up.
Anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under-infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
The way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
The building collapsed to dust. You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big.
What happened to the concrete? The concrete was pulverized from river to river. There was dust powder 2-3 inches thick. The concrete was just pulverized.
In addition to those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
If they had detonated, they were planned to take down a building.
I heard a second explosion.
There was a heavy-duty explosion.
Then there was those secondary explosions and then the subsequent collapses.
An explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
To me, it sounded like an explosion.
It sounded like gunfire. Bang, 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 bang. And then all of a sudden, 3 big explosions.
We heard a big explosion coming down. And then the entire top of the building just blew up.
We saw some kind of explosion.
By the force of the explosion.
Big explosion. Blew it back into the 8th floor.
Then we get to the lobby. This is a big explosion.
The lobby looked as though a bomb
exploded there.
A huge explosion now raining debris.
It's been a huge explosion.
Huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
We just witnessed some kind of follow-up explosion.
We heard a very loud explosion.
And a secondary explosion at Tower 1 camp.
That is another bomb going off. He thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building. Planted in the building.
De mensen die geloven in het complot hebben het vaak over gebouw nummer 7. Dat was een wolkenkrabber van 47 verdiepingen naast de Twin Towers. Op 11 september 2001 heeft er brand gewoed, maar er is nooit een vliegtuig ingevlogen. Toch is ook dit gebouw op 11 september ingestort. Deze gebeurtenis heeft nooit veel aandacht gekregen en ook Denny Jowenko heeft er nooit van gehoord. Zijn reactie op de beelden die we laten zien is onbevangen.
Zie je vanaf boven gaan? Nee, je gaat vanaf onder.
Je gaat vanaf onder, ja.
Toch?
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Er is nagesprongen.
Dit valt anders dan het World Trade Center.
Vind je niet dan?
Ja, je ziet het, de onderste verdiepingen gaan eerst.
Ja, en de rest zakt er gewoon in. Dus dit is controlled demolition. Dus dit is controlled demolition. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten?
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten de 11e? Kan hij waar zijn.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center naar beneden viel.
Ja? Hebben ze hard gewerkt? Hebben ze hard gewerkt? Hebben ze hard gewerkt?
In het officiële onderzoeksrapport van FEMA staat dat ze niet kunnen verklaren waarom gebouw nummer 7 is ingestort. Uitgebreid bespreken we alle mogelijke oorzaken met Denny Jowenko.
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar ze hebben wel...
Maar hij blijft erbij dat het gebouw is opgeblazen.
Kolommen zijn gevallen.
Het is vakwerk, zonder meer. We weten heel goed wat ze doen, die jongens.
Terwijl overal brand was en ook in dat gebouw was brand.
Het is niet geblust.
Ze hebben de brand niet geblust. Dus de mensen die dat moesten doen, die moesten het doen terwijl het binnen nog brandde.
Ja, dat is vreemd. Dat is vreemd. Dat vind ik ook heel vreemd. Daar heb ik geen verklaring voor.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a missile.
Nobody in our government at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes in the buildings.
No specific threat involving really a domestic operation or involving what happened, obviously, the city's airliner and so.
There were no warning signs that I'm aware of.
USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
In confidential documents from the Philippines obtained by CNN, the plan was clear. He will board any American commercial aircraft, control its cockpit, and dive it at the CIA headquarters. Other buildings targeted the Pentagon and the World Trade Center.
Security in counterterrorism was blinking red, in the words of George Tenet, that the warnings of an imminent attack were so severe that something dramatic should have been done. It was unparalleled. Instead, our president went on a month-long vacation.
The French filmmakers, the Naudet brothers, were in New York City doing a documentary about the New York City firefighters. And this clip is the only known footage of the first plane hitting the first tower.
Now, this video clip that we've just examined came again from the Naudet brothers documentary that was being filmed in the streets of New York City on the morning of September 11th. This documentary about the New York City firefighters was going to be assembled at a later date, and it was not televised. In fact, there was no live coverage at all of Flight 11 as it hit the North Tower. After all, it was a surprise attack. So if there was no live television coverage of the first plane hitting the first tower, how do we explain the following comment from George Walker Bush?
What was the first thing that went through your head when you heard that a plane crashed into the first?
Well, I was sitting in a schoolhouse in Florida. I'd gone down to tell my little brother what to do, and you can go ahead and sit down. Just kidding, Jeb. And it's the mother in me. Anyway, I was sitting there, and my chief of staff, well, first of all, when we walked in the classroom, I had seen this plane fly into the first building. There was a TV set on, and you know, I thought it was pilot error. I had seen this plane fly into the first building. There was a TV set on, and you know, I thought it was pilot error.
I had seen this plane fly into the first building. There was a TV set on.
I had seen this plane fly into the first building. There was a TV set on. First building, there was a TV set on.
There was no live coverage at all of Flight 11 as it hit the North Tower.
I had seen this plane fly into the first building. There was a TV set on.
There was no live coverage at all of Flight 11 as it hit the North Tower.
Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11. Do you agree or disagree with the RNC that this kind of rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
Yeah. Look, there's time for politics. And, you know, it's time for politics. And, it's an absurd insinuation. Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves. Away from the guilty. Away from the guilty. Away from the guilty. 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 Guilty.